History is not what was written, but what has survived of what was written. What if you were to discover that the queen who became a symbol of cruelty was actually the victim of history's first fake news campaign? The physics genius who inspired millions was never a failing student, but the victim of a simple statistical misunderstanding. The artist whose madness became iconic was hiding a far more tragic secret in his severed ear. And the emperor accused of burning down his city was, in fact, its first firefighter. These are the stories we think we know, but today we are going to reopen these case files. The gallery of history is filled with portraits, where the true faces of their subjects are hidden under thick layers of lies, propaganda, and myth. Today, we aren't just here to correct a few historical facts. We are here to put history itself on trial. In this video, we will call 4 iconic figures to the witness stand to see how the stories of their lives were forever distorted. We will use science, first-hand documents, and modern research as their defense attorneys. Prepare to face a truth that is far more astonishing than the lies you've believed until now. Albert Einstein, a name that is synonymous with the word genius itself. The man who, with his theory of relativity, forever changed our understanding of space, time, and the cosmos. But alongside the story of his genius, there is another, more comforting tale. A story told to students for generations. That Einstein was a lazy student, that he was bad at math, and that he even failed his university entrance exam. An inspiring message that you don't have to be a top student to be a genius. This story is one of the biggest, and indeed most inspirational, lies in the history of science. And the truth, as always, is far more interesting and complex. Albert Einstein was never bad at mathematics. He was a child prodigy. In an interview, he himself dismissed the rumor with a laugh, saying, "I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15, I had mastered differential and integral calculus." So where did this rumor come from? There are 2 main sources for this historical misunderstanding. First, the university entrance exam. In 1895, at the age of 16, Einstein took the entrance exam for the Zurich Polytechnic. He failed this exam, but that's not the whole story. He was 2 years younger than the standard age for entry, and while he passed the science and mathematics sections with brilliant scores, he failed the general subjects, like French and history. And now, the key detail that closes this case for good. A change in the school's grading system. In 1896, while Einstein was studying at his high school in Switzerland, the school reversed its grading system. Before then, a grade of 1 was the highest score, and 6 was the lowest. But in that year, 6 became the highest score, and 1 became the lowest. Years later, when biographers looked at his earlier report cards and saw the number 1 next to mathematics, they mistakenly assumed he had failed the subject, when in fact, that 1 was the highest possible grade under the old system. As prominent biographers like Walter Isaacson have detailed, Einstein was a rebellious student who disliked the rigid and authoritarian education system of his time. But his mind was soaring in the beautiful world of mathematics and physics from the very beginning. The story of his weakness in math is a comforting myth, but the true story of a young genius challenging the education system of his era is far more powerful. From the genius that history misunderstood, we turn to a queen that history deliberately distorted. Marie Antoinette, the Austrian Archduchess who married Louis XVI and became the last queen of France before the Revolution. At the height of a famine, as the people of Paris were crying out for bread, the queen casually said, "If they have no bread, let them eat cake." This sentence turned her into the most hated woman in France, but it was a calculated lie. There is no credible evidence in any document, letter, or diary from that period to suggest that Marie Antoinette ever said this. The origin of this quote traces back to the book Confessions by the great philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He tells this story about a great princess. but he wrote it when Marie Antoinette was only a 9-year-old child in Austria. This sentence was a deadly propaganda weapon in the hands of revolutionaries like Camille Desmoulins. They deliberately spread this rumor to fuel the public's anger. Meanwhile, Marie Antoinette's own personal letters paint a completely different picture. In a letter to her mother, she writes, "It is quite certain that in seeing the people who treat us so well despite their own misfortune, we are more obliged than ever to work hard for their happiness." These are the words of a compassionate queen, not the monster that history has made for us.
Vincent van Gogh, a painter who lived in poverty and obscurity, yet whose works are among the most expensive in the world today. His life is a story of genius intertwined with severe mental illness and profound suffering. In a fit of madness, Van Gogh took a razor, cut off his entire left ear, and gave it as a gift to a prostitute. This story is the perfect symbol of the mad artist. But its details, illuminated by medical science and historical research, make the story far more complex. First, he did not cut off his entire ear. According to a letter from Dr. Felix Ray, the physician who treated him, he had only severed his left earlobe. The woman was not a random prostitute. New research by historian Bernadette Murphy suggests her name was Gabrielle Berlatier, a young maid who worked at a brothel. And the bigger mystery, was it really self-mutilation? Some theories, including one proposed by German historians Hans Kaufmann and Rita Wildegans, suggest that his friend, the painter Paul Gauguin, who was a skilled fencer, may have cut off Van Gogh's earlobe with his sword during a heated argument, and both men agreed to tell the self-harm story to protect Gauguin from being arrested. We may never know the absolute truth, but the story is far more than a simple act of madness. Nero, the 5th emperor of Rome, a name that has become synonymous with tyranny, despotism, and setting his own capital ablaze. The popular belief. In the year 64 AD, as the Great Fire was destroying a huge part of Rome, Nero calmly stood on his palace balcony, playing his instrument and singing about the fall of Troy. This image has cemented Nero in history as a narcissistic monster, but our most reliable historical source from that era, the writings of the great Roman historian Tacitus, tells a completely different story. Tacitus writes that when the fire started, Nero was not in Rome at all, but was staying at his seaside villa in Antium, 50 kilometers away. Upon hearing the news, he rushed back to Rome and personally commanded the relief efforts. He opened his palaces and gardens to the homeless and built temporary shelters, paying for it all from his own funds. So why does history blame him? After the fire, Nero began construction of his grand palace, the Domus Aurea, or Golden House, on the ruins. This led his political enemies to suspect that he had intentionally set the fire to build his dream palace. Later historians who were hostile to his dynasty, like Suetonius, recorded this rumor as fact. And so, the emperor who had tried to save his city was immortalized as its destroyer.
A genius who was called a fool. A queen who was victimized by propaganda. An artist whose pain was deeper than the legends. And an emperor who was condemned by history. These 4 stories show us that the portraits of history are not painted with oil, but with the ink of bias, fear, and power. The truth is often hidden in the shadows, and to see it, we must look beyond the golden frames and the famous tales. Here at Simple But Deep, we search for the real story, no matter how deep it's buried in history. If you are a truth seeker too, join us on this journey by liking and subscribing. And tell me in the comments, which of these distorted portraits made you think the most? Thanks for watching, and as always, see simple, think deep.